accurate in terms of our history. In fact, just the opposite is true. It's the only time we've been able to reduce spending. I see the distinguished majority leaders on the floor, so I'll be short, Madam President. Just to say that we need to figure out how to come together. The President needs to engage. It's time to govern. If the President refuses to talk, we won't be able to come to an agreement. If he does engage, as history has shown us, tough decisions can be made. I've gone through a litany of times when we have done it. I have also talked about the fact that this year we have a bigger debt than ever, a bigger deficit than any of those historical examples I gave. Therefore, a greater need than ever for us to come together and find that common ground.
If the senator would yield for a moment, I think the distinguished majority leader is going to make a procedural motion which will take only a moment. And then I have a question for my distinguished friend.
Happy to yield.
Madam President, I ask unanimous consent. The period for morning business be extended until 5 p.m. today, that all provisions of the previous order remain in effect.
Without objection.
And I appreciate my two friends for yielding for this consent agreement.
Well, I think the distinguished...
The senator from Mississippi.
Thank you. Madam President, as far as I'm concerned, my distinguished friend from Ohio can still have the floor. I only wanted to take a moment to congratulate him on his remarks, to observe that when it comes to budget matters, he knows whereof he speaks, with not only a distinguished record in the House of Representatives and a leader in being a budget hawk and an opponent of additional debt in the House of Representatives, and then a distinguished career in the Office of Management and Budget. So I thank the distinguished gentleman. It may be that he has already asked for an opinion piece from today's Wall Street Journal to be put into the record.
I have not.
I would ask, if I might, Madam President, for an opinion piece written by Kevin Hassett and Abby McCloskey on page A23 of today's Wall Street Journal, entitled "Obama Rewrites Debt Limit History." I would ask that that be placed in the congressional record at this point.
Without objection.
And I thank you, Madam President, because this article points out in a very detailed and annotated way a number of times when this Congress has made policy changes, important, far-reaching policy changes in connection with negotiations on the debt ceiling increase. And so I would just join my friend from Ohio in saying that absolutely it is incumbent on this Senate, Republican and our friends on the Democratic side of the aisle, members of the House of Representatives, and the President of the United States, our Commander-in-Chief, once again to negotiate in good faith. The President may feel that we are entirely unreasonable in our position. And frankly, there have been times during my 19 years in the House and now in the Senate when I felt that the Chief Executive was completely wrong in his viewpoint on how we should address our national debt. But at no time, in my recollection, have the parties been simply unwilling to sit down and talk at all, to have meetings in the White House, and those meetings basically say, we're not going to make counter proposals, to say publicly, why should I offer them anything at all? To me, I think the American people see that that is an unworkable approach. And so I would point out to my colleagues and thank the senator from Ohio in pointing out that very important fiscal decisions, very important debt-related decisions have absolutely been made in our nation's history, and I'm glad they have been made in connection with this debate on the national debt. So I'll yield back to my friend from Ohio and thank him for allowing me to intrude on his time.
Gentlemen, we'll hold for a moment. First, thank you for raising that op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. I had not seen it yet, so I look forward to reading it myself. But it sounds like it is consistent with what I was pointing out, which is it only makes sense that the American people would want us to reduce spending when you extend the debt limit yet again. Again, at historic levels now, the American people get it. They know you can't keep spending more than you take in, so they expect us to do something on the underlying problem.
The senator from Ohio mentioned the Budget Control Act of 2011. It wasn't a particularly pretty way to do debt reduction, but it did give us the spending levels that we're operating under now. The authors of this opinion piece go on to point out that according to the Congressional Research Service, an independent arm of this government, Congress voted 53 times from 1978 to 2013 to change the debt ceiling. This debt ceiling has increased to about $16 trillion. And of these 53 votes, 29 occurred in Congress run by Democrats, 17 in split Congresses, and 7 in Republican-controlled Congresses. It goes on to point out time and again how important policy changes were made in connection with this debate. So I thank my friend for yielding.
I'd like to ask my friend from Mississippi a question. He has been a stalwart on the budget debates. He's a guy who's always held the line. He did it in the House. He's done it here. He voted for the Budget Control Act because he believed we needed to get our spending under control. He also wants to ensure that we deal with the part of the budget that's not being talked about, because the whole continuing resolution debates about 35% of the budget. The other 65%, which is the faster growing part, based on the Congressional Budget Office, parts of that, the health care entitlements, will grow at over 100% over the next 10 years. And I would just ask him if he's hearing what I'm hearing back home from our constituents, which is that they want us to do something on the spending before we extend the credit card limit again. And I wonder if he could tell us a little bit what he's hearing back home, given his background.
The distinguished gentleman from Ohio is absolutely correct. As a matter of fact, the American people are alarmed, actually, at the level of debt that this government has run up, particularly in the last 4.5 to 5 years. It's just been astounding. We cannot continue to add debt upon debt for the next generation, many of whom are in the sound of our voices, some of whom are employed as our pages, and the senator has already referred to them today. We owe them a government that grows our debt at a much slower rate. And we've done it before. When the distinguished senator and I were in the House of Representatives, we were told we could not balance the budget within 10 years. Well, actually, with the leadership of my friend from Ohio, we passed legislation. We had the cooperation of the President of the United States, who negotiated with us. And that government, divided government, balanced the budget not within 10 years, but really within 3 or 4 years. And we held that until the terrorist attacks of 2011. So yes, the American people are concerned about this. I think we would be doing a disservice to them simply to go along with a debt increase without addressing the underlying problems. And as my friend from Ohio knows, the President of the United States himself in this budget has proposed very significant changes in the growth rate of certain of our entitlement programs, which would go a long way toward getting us to a bipartisan resolution on this issue.
The gentleman raises an important point, which is that larger part of the budget, the 65% of the budget that's not being debated as part of the continuing resolution, not subject to congressional appropriations, and the faster growing part of the budget, that's an issue the president actually did address in his own budget. In fact, he laid out a number of proposals called mandatory spending reforms that would help to reduce some of the debt by reducing some of the cost increases on that 65% of the budget. And by the way, 65% today, 10 years from now, it'll be 76% of the budget. And the departments and agencies that are appropriated here every year is only 35%, soon to be reduced to 24% of the budget. And so that's a very good point you make. The president himself has pointed out that we need to make changes here, and yet he refuses to negotiate, refuses to talk, refuses to consider any of these proposals. It doesn't seem to make sense, and it's certainly not in the interest of the American people and the people of Mississippi and the people of Ohio. So I really thank my colleague from Mississippi for coming down. I look forward to reading further the new material that he's provided for the record here today. I thank him for his leadership, and Madam Chair, I yield back my time.